And we're live.
Welcome to Top to Bottom. I am your co-host, Becc, and I normally don't lead this, but today we have a guest. So for all those who are watching, I've gotten a number of concerned emails. No, Keenan and I aren't breaking up. No, the podcast isn't over. No, we didn't have a fight. Today, we swapped in a wonderful, wonderful guest who's Mark Kosoglow, has an incredible background in SaaS, built the entire team at Outreach, and is now working with CX Platform. So welcome, Mark, to the Top to Bottom podcast. I always get to ask you questions. So my question is, you get a choice. You can either answer the question of, out of the two Top to Bottom podcast hosts, who's your favorite?
Oh.
Right. Or you can give me your thoughts on the new Bachelor that started yesterday, Zach Shawcross. Your choice.
While I am a reality TV aficionado, I do not partake in The Bachelor specifically, so I have no thoughts there. And listen, I mean, Becc, it's not too hard for me to pick a favorite, but I think before I do, I should share some screenshots of what Keenan's been texting me. You might not be quite aware of the status of your relationship currently. And therefore, since I feel bad for you, you're my favorite host today.
Have I been dumped? Have I not gotten a rose secretly and don't know it?
Maybe I got your digital rose.
Oh my gosh. Well, welcome to the podcast. Now I'm even more glad that you're here. We don't need Keenan. We can have fun without him.
Who?
Exactly.
Who?
I mean, he doesn't even have a first name or a last name. I'm not sure. There's just a period after it.
Hey, when Jimmy Kimmel or somebody like that brings in a great guest host and everybody thinks the show's way better with the new guy, that's what this is. Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
This is exactly when Keenan disables his LinkedIn account.
Yeah, exactly. This is Substitute Teacherville. We're on Keenan's account and we get to talk smack all about Keenan. I love it. Best episode so far.
Well, with that, we are going to start this podcast with the first segment, which is
Email Teardown.
This is the segment where we tear down emails that were sent to Becc and Keenan. However, Mark, you'll be going over these emails with us today. And the very first email was sent to Keenan, and the subject line is dedicated recruiters at a reasonable cost. Hi, we are a full-service RPO, recruitment process outsourcing firm, delivering top qualified and expert dedicated recruiters at a reasonable cost to meet your recruiting needs to companies and hiring errors with temp to hire. You could reduce your recruitment costs to 30 to 50%. If this is something that you are looking for, let's set up a time to chat or call to discuss further steps. Best regards, blank sender.
Meeting booked.
Yes. Mark, why don't you tell us what you think about this?
I want to do this Keenan impression right now. Oh my God. What are we doing here, y'all? This isn't gap selling techniques. I don't know. I think I feel like I've already lost the inspiration. Listen, I think it's so weird when you use an acronym and then you have to explain it. I will shout out one good thing about this email. Super short.
Yeah.
So at least we got that going for us. So let's build off the positives, right? But let's not use an acronym when we have to explain what it is. Let's just explain what it is, right? The other thing is I think that's really weird is I kind of read this email and I'm like, now what am I getting and why do I want this? And there's nothing addressing why I might be interested in this other than they could reduce my spend, which, maybe I care about or maybe I don't. So I think that's where I would start. I'm sure Becc will go back and forth, but it's not starting to me with something that interests me at all. So I probably just saw this on the preview part of my email app on my phone and just hit archive.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about you, Becc? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think Mark is dead on, and that was a pretty dicey Keenan impression, by the way. He goes, watch what I'm going to do here. Watch what I'm going to do here. So in terms of this email, the couple things that I wanted to highlight in addition to what you were saying is there's a number of different grammatical errors, format errors, two different fonts that are going on. They're all circled. Some things are bolded, some things aren't, and I'm not really clear on why they're bolded. So that's the first one I'm going to lead off with. But the second one that I really wanted to double down on is this last line. If this is something that you are looking for, and it seems benign, but what that means is this is marketing email. Marketing's job is to somewhat attract demand that already exists in the market, meaning they're aware that they have a problem, they're aware that they need to solve it, and you want to be the one flyer that's in front of them, but they already know. But from my perspective, at least, where you can light your outbound numbers on fire is by creating demand, by finding a problem that they didn't know about, or finding a future impact that they didn't know about that causes a problem, or finding a current event that just happened that causes a problem in the present. That's where you're really going to get buyers to, quote unquote, create a buyer initiative, because beforehand they didn't have one, but now they have one because they're aware of a problem that they didn't know. So the value of an email is things that they didn't know. And if you're hinging in here on, prerequisite, I already know this, and you're kind of already in the tough.
Also, Beck, is it obvious to you how cut and pasted, robotic, like this is just mass spam email. There's nothing in here about me. It looks like this person sent out 3,000 of these today through some outsourcer.
Yep.
It's just, there's nothing there to draw me in at all. And here's the other thing. Phrases like top qualified and expert, those are very ambiguous terms. Like, I don't even understand what that means. What is a top qualified dedicated recruiter? How do I qualify a recruiter? Why are they an expert? Like, what does that get me if I have a top qualified and expert? There's just a lot of questions around some of the phrasing that make the overall email make me have to make mental leaps. And when I'm responding to cold email, if I have to mentally jump, that means I'm mentally jumping off of your email into the next thing I need to do. Like, don't make me jump, keep my feet firmly planted, walking me through what I need to do so that I end up in the place where you can ask me to do something and I can decide if I want to be there. But this email is just too vague, and it feels like a wide net email. Like, I'm going to send this out to 10,000 people. Hopefully 200 or 300 people will be dumb enough to reply, and then I'll deal with it there. Yeah. Spray and pray, hope and rope. What else we got?
Hope and rope.
Awesome. A little weird.
Mark a little got the horn. It took all the soldiers fall in top to bottom.
Don't you worry. The very first episode of the new year, I had to horn myself.
Vin had to horn himself. It was really sad. It was a sad day.
100%. But on to our next segment of this podcast, which is
Sales Mythology.
This is the segment where we demystify common myths within the sales industry. So the first myth of today is the only information that I need to acquire in discovery is what the prospect believes, and in the sense of what they say they need, how it impacts them, et cetera, et cetera. Beck, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, so this is a big one to me. And the first question that I'd lead with is, when I'm going into discovery, and this is with a beating heart. What are you discovering? What are you trying to discover? And all that's fine and good to uncover a self-diagnosis. I think it's extremely important what they say they need, what they think the solution is, what they think the current impact is, what they think root causes are, etc. But if you're doing that, there's a number of different offshoots of negatives that are going to happen to you. Number one, you're not going to acquire any of the information that will help you build your expert diagnosis of what you think the problem is, and what you think the root cause is, and what you think the impacts are, and what you think the solution really is. So statistically speaking, somewhere in there, they're going to be wrong. And the reason they're going to be wrong, incorrect, is because it's not their expertise. So if I'm only acquiring that information, then I'm essentially begging my prospect to give me a self-diagnosis that usually is going to be incorrect. The second piece is you're adding no value as the seller. So a prospect's going to jump on a line. They usually jump on a line because they want to acquire the one piece of information that they think that they don't know, that they believe that you also know, which is just pricing. That's why they ask for it right off the bat. But if I'm asking for all the things the buyer believes, the buyer thinks, the buyer has noticed, I'm adding no value to that buyer because I'm not helping uncover anything for them that they didn't know before the call. So you've seen product-led growth explode. You've seen, basically 87% of buyers don't want a seller involved. And the reason behind that, if I had to guess, in their experience, they never get any information that they didn't know beforehand unless it's a demo and then it's price. So if you're hinging off of that information, I'm going to pass to Mark, you're hinging off of that information, you are adding no information to the buyer that they didn't know beforehand, that they not only want, but they need, and is your job to add as a seller and an expert in the field. So Mark, what do you think? What are your thoughts on it?
There's two ways to approach a discovery call. One is with a pre-baked hypothesis based on research that you're looking to confirm. That includes current initiatives underway, current investments. It talks about what they can't do or user level pain, what they're not getting because of that pain, which means, what is the business initiative that's being missed or the business goal being missed? And then the measurement of what that is. So like I use the despite X, despite A, we can't do X, which means we don't get Y as measured by Z. That's a formula to create a hypothesis that you can go research and then confirm. The second way is what I call a visual context question. Becc, you and Keenan were sitting last week on the bus for the tour, and you had this amazing story that you told, that I'm sure that you have, where you're sitting down eating something, and you both got super passionate, and one of you got up, wrote something on a piece of paper, and took out your gum and stuck it to the window of the bus to remind yourselves of it for the rest of the tour. What'd you write on that piece of paper? And I take you on a narrative journey of what your mind subconsciously fills in, what you wrote on that piece of paper, which will help you get me a better answer, versus just saying, hey, what are the top 2 challenges that y'all figured out when you were on the tour last year? Mm-hmm. And so those are the 2 ways. The first way is if you can find the information and it's a more guided conversation. The second way, you have to be comfortable with the unknown because it could go wherever you want to. And wherever the customer wants to, and that's where it should go. Mm-hmm. So you have to just be more able to have a free-flowing conversation if you decide option 2, which is you need to do a lot of times because sometimes there's not information. I don't know what you need to discover in a discovery call. I know what needs to happen is you need to create in them enough belief to start to do the hard work of an evaluation. And if that belief is you summarizing what you learned, if it's you showing them something, that's what you need to do. Because if you don't get belief, they'll start no-showing you.
Yeah, if you didn't find something deep enough. And one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking, I love that piece of gum analogy because sometimes they haven't thought it through, what problem they were really trying to solve. But one of the things that I've noticed is a question by default that teaches them something that they didn't know. Is a lot of times I'll ask current state questions of okay, so and again, the 2 goals for me are, can I uncover their self-diagnosis and the why behind it? Can I uncover my expert diagnosis and develop it? And if there's a difference, I'm going to have to challenge in the demo stage. And then I'm going to uncover the problems that they didn't know about. And those latter 2 buckets are really the buckets that I'm after in the conversation. But something that I've noticed is when I'm trying to acquire pieces of information to help me either develop my diagnosis, or to even get the reasoning of why behind their diagnosis, it helps teach them something. So I'll give you an example. So they'll say hey, we have a quota attainment problem. I'll be define problem. What are the metrics? They're okay, 10 meetings a month is the current metric. We're at 3 meetings a month, including inbound. I'm yikes. Okay, so I know the problem. The delta is there's 7 meetings that they're gapping to quota. So I'm so if you walk me through the current stage of outreach, how many calls are they making per day? How many emails are they sending per day? And what time of day are they sending them and making those calls? And almost every time, I'd say 98% of the time, they're shoot, I don't know. And I'm okay, so can you pull up your sales engagement provider? And I'll walk them through their sales engagement provider. and they'll have to double down and they'll have to find out those current metrics. They're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea they're only making 5 calls per day. And that's a piece of value to them that was in their current state, like to Mark's point, that they didn't even know about, that brings to deck to them something like a root cause that they would have diagnosed was a root cause if they had found that piece of information. So from my view, I'm like hinging off of what Mark says. How do you uncover, what their self-diagnosis is and get them to envision and fill in that gap? But then how do I discover all the information that makes me confident that my diagnosis is correct? And if there's a difference between that diagnosis and their diagnosis, then I know where I can fill in the gap so I can enable them with not only information that I didn't know. Maybe they don't need your tool. Maybe they need a different part of your tool. And maybe there are additional problems that they could have solved they didn't know before. That's my end of soapbox rant.
Well, this kind of goes into our next sales mythology, which is, generally speaking, my prospects know what they're talking about in regards to what they want. So, Mark, why don't you talk to us a little bit about this?
Yeah, listen, I think that people have a directionally accurate view of what they want. I don't think it's always a complete picture. If everybody knew exactly what they wanted, then they could just go get it, and salespeople wouldn't need to exist. So, but at the same time, I don't think that it's very good for salespeople to create wants that people have no idea or have any desire to do. Like when I go to the car lot to buy a new car, I don't want somebody trying to sell me, a goat. You know what I mean? Like it's just off the thing. So I think generally people have an idea of kind of what they want. The problem is most people haven't thought about what's causing the problem, and their want isn't completely aligned to the root solution that they need to create. And that's the alignment that a salesperson needs to create, is they need to say, hey, let me think this through with you a little bit more. I'm a subject matter expert. That's your job as a salesperson. I understand this problem better than you because I talk to people about it all day long, every single day. Like, this is what I do. And our job, as Becc said, is like, uncover those things that they don't quite know about. What are those unsolved problems that they just aren't aware of that we help them uncover? And then that will help influence what they want and redefine what they want probably more accurately than they can by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Becc, what do you think about this?
To your point, what I was thinking, and then we can wrap up this section, but usually what they want is an outcome. But what they tell you they want is a solution because they want that outcome and they believe that solution will get them there. So them wanting the outcome, to Mark's point, I don't think you can challenge that. You can challenge that it's doable or it's solvable or the root cause or that this is the solution to do it. But what you really need to challenge, in my opinion, is what they say they want as the solution, because if you give it to them, it might not help them get their outcome, and that's a missed opportunity for you to help add value. I don't know if I hit the horn. I'm not sure.
You hit the horn, but I was a little bit slow on my draw.
Appreciate that slow draw.
Well, now we're on to our next segment of this podcast, which is Take It or Leave It. This is the segment where I introduce common sales tactics, and Becc and Mark will let us know whether they will take it or leave it. So the first one for today is letting reps work virtually. Mark, take it or leave it?
Take it. I never worked in an office until 2 years. I worked in an office in Seattle, and I was a high-performing rep. Like, what are we talking about? Are we hiring kids or are we hiring adults? Like, if you can't manage yourself, then go work in an office. If you can, work wherever you want.
I get you. Becc, take it or leave it?
So, by the way, Mark, this is where Keenan tells me that we should disagree. This is so I'm actually, oddly enough, I'll leave it. And the reason behind that is, and maybe for context, I really, my hand in team development was SDRs. So there's a difference usually with SDRs and AEs, or me as a rep as an SDR and an AE, when they're earlier to their careers, it's hard to make cold calls. It's hard to send the emails. And I feel like it kind of enables them to slip into this sweatpants mentality. Now, you're going to have to flex with the market. of like some people are offering virtual, but like by and large for the craft, for SDRs in specific, I'm oddly enough to leave it. Sorry, Mark.
Now, the next take it or leave it for today is checking your reps' activity metrics every day. Becc, take it or leave it.
Hell yeah, take it. I'm not a micromanager. I'm known as not a non-micromanager. You can ask men. But I want to get a 20 on where are they at, how are they feeling. Sometimes they're feeling demotivated. Sometimes they're not putting in the inputs that are going to get them there long term. So I at least want to see a 20. Maybe not on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis of how they're splitting out per day.
What about you, Mark? Take it or leave it.
Are we sticking in the SDR world? Like SDR world.
We could go both. Both.
Well, I'd say for SDR world, it's not take it. It's like if you don't take it, you're ridiculous. Like you have no idea how to do your job. It is a operational job. It's part machine and a little bit of human. If you do all the machine work right, then your humanity gets to shine and you crush your number. If you don't do the machine part, your humanity will never make it up. Yeah. So like, yeah, for AEs, I think looking at daily activity is micromanaging. Like, you know, it's difficult if you have 4 important meetings on 4 big deals that day and you got to prep for them and you don't get in your numbers. Like, what should I encourage you to do? Go make a couple crappy dials or like spend half an hour more getting for a big meeting. So I'm a little more lenient on that kind of stuff, but that's where great sales leadership comes in, is the balance between freedom and accountability. And you need both. You just have to depend on the sliding scale where your team needs you to be to perform best.
Yeah, to your point, I'm a take it to for AEs, like just so I know, but I don't tell them that. I'm data, but I'm not going to tell them I'm vegan. Just want to get a 20, you know? What's going on?
Well, the last one for today is AEs coaching SDRs on messaging. Mark, why don't you go first on this? Take it or leave it?
Leave it. I mean, isn't that what an SDR manager is for? How many people do we need to coach in SDR, and how many people do we need to have in the kitchen of messaging? Like marketing and SDR leadership should work on high-performing messaging that they're constantly testing and making sure that it keeps working the way that it should. Like this is, I don't know. I've heard the whole like AE SDR work together thing, and I don't know if it's actually that as much of a value as we think it is.
Now, what about you, Becc? Take it or leave it?
Okay, Keenan, so if you're watching this, I want you to time marker that at 1 minute on January 25th, 2023, year of our Lord, this is the moment that I decided you're officially kicked off the podcast. And Mark is now the new co-host.
Yeah.
Sorry, Keenan. You just got booted straight out. I completely agree with him of like, A, that's the SDR manager's job. B, like the AE shouldn't be spending time there. And like sometimes, you know, like the AE should focus on closing. Sometimes they'll give over tips that maybe the SDR manager didn't like and doesn't condone, and they'll start doing them. And then when they're ineffective, they come back to the SDR manager. I'm like, well, why'd you do that, Brendan? I'm like, we were, you know, like I knew the habits that were going to get you there. That's their job as an SDR manager. So I am a hard leave it as well with Mark, and Keenan, you're booted. Sorry. I mean, it was a great ride. It was a great ride, Keenan. I'm really going to miss you. I'm going to cry. But Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, our very new brand new host. With that, we go on to my personal favorite section of the podcast, which is
the inbox.
This is the segment where Becc and Mark will answer questions from our audience. And for that, we have the special help of the mighty mailbox. Okay, let's see.
That mailbox. Mark, his first executive decision, you want to get rid of that?
Please don't.
Look at me. I am now just as handsome as Keenan. And we can say goodbye to Keenan together.
Bye, Keenan.
R.I.P.
I mean, bye, Keenan.
How could you do this to me? You spend hours on a boat together talking about these philosophical things.
And he goes, what problem are you trying to solve?
Oh, yeah. 100%. 100%. That's hilarious. Well, okay.
When I saw that, by the way, I was like, oh my God, he's here. Like, this was a trap. And he didn't tell you this is a trap.
Okay. This very first question is from Tina Garza from Austin, Texas. What do y'all think about ChatGPT? What role do you see it playing in sales and prospecting? Mark, why don't you go first on this one? What do you think?
Keenan, what do you want to say? I think ChatGPT sucks. All right. Listen, I don't know, man. This crap is so new. Like, who knows what it means? Like, I did a post today where I just put some prompts on there. So let me tell you this interesting story. Buddy of mine, huge SDR leader at Outreach, has an awesome private practice where he does stuff. He's writing his PhD dissertation on economic development in impoverished areas and focusing specifically on a very small people group that is dying off in Iraq. And I'm like, dude, you're in tech, just have GPT write your dissertation. And he's like, oh, no way, they never. I typed into ChatGPT the name of the people and like, tell me about how socially blah, 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 and give me 3 paragraphs. I was like, the stuff was dead on, right? So it's a little scary what it can do and how it works. But this is what I am using it for right now is let's say that I want to see a different version of an email that I've written that is shorter, more punchy, or I want to see like what it would look like. I would just throw it into GPT and say, hey, can you edit this email to be a little bit more forceful? Can you edit this email and get rid of 50% of the words? And it'll just do it. And I can see a version of it that I might want to be interested in right now. So I'm just using it more like let me see something I would want to do without me having to do the work to see if I actually want to do the work or not.
Now, Becc, what do you think about ChatGPT?
I'm still a little terrorized by the Keenan that might come out of the corner. But what I think about ChatGPT. So I think that it is going to cause an interesting market. What I think it's going to do is it's going to take away the function of people who, to Mark's point, are writing emails that might be lackluster relevant and sending those emails for a living. Now I can just use ChatGPT. I can send it from an automation perspective and nail that out to 2,000 people. So I think it evaporates that market to a large degree. But what it introduces is the opportunity of what, in my perspective, we should have been doing the entire time, which is focusing on the actual prospect, identifying things from them from a personalization perspective, hooking those to why it would be relevant, to talk to you based on the metrics that they're likely trying to achieve or the goals that they're trying to achieve in accordance with those metrics. So I think it evaporates the function of the market that was just writing lackluster templates. It's like throw them into ChatGPT. Now it can give you a beefed up version. Like I did an email teardown the other day. I'm going to close with this. I did an email teardown the other day. I had 15 emails. They told me they had a surprise. I tore down each one of the emails and they're like, hey, can you rank the emails? So I ranked them. They told me that one of the emails, they're like, so the surprise is that one of these emails was by ChatGPT and it was number 1. Out of the 15 emails that I tore down, it was number 1 for quality. So I will say, I think it forces sellers and SDRs to really start thinking because the non-thinking portion is now gone. Please don't bring that Keenan back. I don't know what it is about that doll in the back. Shout out Mark for being able to do that.
A little bit early. Well, now we're on to our next segment of this podcast, which is
the challenge.
This is the segment where Becc and Mark will break down a challenging subject within the sales industry. Now, I hope that y'all have brought your plungers because we're about to flush twice. The topic for today is how to not ask shit questions. And I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to cuss, but so we're talking about self-diagnosis questions, leading questions, etc. Becc, why don't you start us off with this challenge?
Oh, this is such a big book, such a big book. And I see sellers asking all the time, like, what question? That equally terrified me, by the way, Mark. They're like, what question should I ask? What question should I ask? And the goal that or the reason that they struggle with asking questions, in my view, is they have no agenda on the call other than to make the buyer feel a certain way, to feel like they have pain, to feel like they should buy. And that's the only agenda. So like, how do I get the buyer to think in a certain way? And while that's all fine and good, if you supplant the agenda with my agenda is to diagnose, all of a sudden the what question should I ask falls by the wayside because they start stacking up questions in a way that'll help them diagnose. So I think the vast majority of questions that I hear specifically when in discovery, honestly, like, and I say this with an inherent, like, unbelievable love for sales, they hurt my stomach because they're like, what if you could? Imagine you could be walking down the beach. How's that currently impacting you, Tim? How's that currently impacting you, Mark? What's your son's name? Little Timmy. Well, how is your hurt arm impacting your relationship with little Timmy? You know, well, I guess I can't throw the ball. And it's just like the entire time front to end. Buyers and sellers are at war. Their goals are mutually exclusive. Buyer wants to buy something at the lowest ticket price just to solve their problems. Seller wants to sell as many things as they can at the highest ticket price. They're already at war. They're mutually exclusive goals. So my plea is to restore yourself to the side of the buyer and say their goal is to solve as many problems that they can. My goal needs to be that too. And if that's the goal, all of the most of the self-diagnosis questions, but certainly the leading questions, the agenda-driven questions, and the, you know, I'm here to get you somewhere that's advantageous to me as a seller. Those will fall by the wayside. Like, those have to go. Our buyers can feel it. They start to, you know, recoil, take back information because they're like, I don't trust this person because they're trying to get me somewhere. So I'm going to close by saying with this, if you're asking any questions, and this was a good litmus test for me, I'd ask myself two questions. Number one, am I asking this question to lead someone somewhere, prove an agenda, or am I asking this question because I genuinely want to understand the information? The second question I would ask myself before I ask a question is, when I'm asking questions to my prospects, when they're typically answering me, am I thinking about my next question? If that answer is a yes, you're leading them somewhere. So we've got to stop, let those fall by the wayside, and start asking the questions we'll most effectively diagnose. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I know what Keenan would say. Buy my book, sign up for training. I'm pitching my stuff right now. That's what he would do, which we know is all wrong and not the right thing to do. But like, here's the deal is there are two ways to not ask bad questions. The first is so simple and so easy, and every single one of us can do it. That's listen. Mm-hmm. Like, shut your brain up, shut up where you want to go, and just listen. Mm-hmm. And like, you know how like when you sit down with a friend and you have a good dinner and like you don't know where the conversations go, you don't know what's going to happen, you're just really interested in that person and care about them. Mm-hmm. If you do that with your prospects, you'll have the same awesome conversations that you do with your friends. And like, I make friends in my discovery calls because I listen, right? And in listening, a buyer will tell you how to sell them if you let them. Mm-hmm. And most people are just too busy trying to figure out how to sell them instead of just letting somebody tell them. So that's the first thing that you got to do, is make sure that. The second thing is a little bit harder, and something you have to come to grips with, is you can't be afraid where the conversation is going to go. People get nervous that something's going to happen that they don't know how to react to, so they only ask questions that thread the conversation in areas where they feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that means that you are eliminating all of the purpose of discovery, and the purpose of a question is because you're limiting someone's answer. When you limit someone's answer, you don't get everything that you need out of that question. And so, number one, listen. And number two, don't be scared for them to say something. Like, you know what you say if somebody says something or asks a question back to you or something that you have no clue what the answer is, wow, great question. I've never thought about that. Why don't we book a meeting next week? I'll get you an answer and we'll both learn together. That's like an amazing experience for a buyer. So listen, like, don't be scared of where it's going to go, and ask crappy questions that steer someone into areas where you only feel comfortable. And lastly, like, just listen a little bit more.
So I was thinking of when you were when you were bringing up those place cards. Oddly enough, there's this game called Guess Who. Have you ever played that game, Mark?
Guess Who?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so it's I know you have kids. Don't you have
I do.
2 kids?
Four
Two
kids.
4 kids. How old are they?
22, 21, 18, and 13. And dad brag, my youngest daughter graduated college in 2.5 years. She just started as an SDR in Seattle at Outreach. And in her first 2.5 weeks, she's booked 8 meetings already.
Sick.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh my
Dad
God.
brag.
Okay, I had no idea that you had kids that were that age. Good. I need your skin regimen, Mark. On a side note, but there's this game. It's called Guess Who, and my sister has 4 kids too. They're 10 all the way down to 4. And I was playing Guess Who when I was home a couple weeks ago with Kate. And it's essentially you both get boards with 100 people on them, and she has 100 people on hers too that are facing towards you, and you get to ask questions. And you're trying to guess who the person is by the questions that you ask. So how you can gamify it is, how can I ask a question that will nail out like as many people as possible of who it's not? And so when I'm thinking of discovery, that's how I'm thinking about it. Of like, your prospects, I have question fatigue, especially if it's a question that they didn't gain any new understanding from. So I'm like, if they didn't know anything after the question they didn't know beforehand, or they weren't considering something in a different way, then there was no value added. So even though you have to ask current state questions of like, what's, sales engagement provider are you using, for example, I'm viewing those of like, how do I ask those together so that I can balance the value? And how can I ask the questions the most effectively to nail out all of the root causes that it's not, so I can get down to what I think that the root cause really is. And the opportunity cost of that is not only question fatigue, but time. Like my sister, TLDR, she is an ER doctor. And like, she has a very limited amount of time of which she can ask questions to be able to diagnose effectively. And that is her freaking job. So I'm like, I try to warp my mindset of like, what are the questions that will nail out the majority of these answers so I can get to diagnose the root causes, the problems, the impacts, as quickly as possible. And you should absolutely play a Guess Who, Mark. Maybe, if you have a 21-year-old and 22-year-old, maybe they'll be bored, but it's a good game.
Now, what do y'all think is, for self-diagnosis questions, how do you avoid pushing towards self-diagnosis questions?
Yeah. You want to lead, Mark, or me?
No, go ahead.
Well, anytime you're saying, what do you think? What do you want? What do you think the problem is, etc.? It's a self-diagnosis question. Again, I don't want to underscore the importance. You need to know what their self-diagnosis question is, if nothing else, to help you stack up into the problem that they want to solve, the outcome that they want to see, and a lot of the pieces will help you build your diagnosis. But the questions that help me build my diagnosis are nothing about what they think or what they feel. And I'll give you an example. Like if I'm asking how many calls are they making per day, or can you show me an example of one of the emails that they're sending, or what time of day are they making those calls? It has nothing to do with what they think. I'm trying to acquire a piece of current state information that helps me build my diagnosis in the long term. So they seem somewhat almost like they don't know why you're necessarily asking. When a patient walks into a doctor's office, they're not sure necessarily why the doctor's asking if they drink more than 2 or 3 times a week, or if they, if they've been sleeping less than normal. They're not sure why they're asking, but it's helping them build the diagnosis. 17 seconds, Mark, you finish this out.
Yeah, listen, diagnosis or prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. You have to correctly diagnose, and most people that go to the doctor have incorrectly self-diagnosed. And unfortunately, Tableau/Google/BI makes it too easy to self-diagnose wrong.
Gave you a little pass.
Totally.
I nailed it.
Most buyers have done research beforehand. They've had to.
Man,
They've
that was
had
it. I
to.
was 18 seconds over.
18 seconds, no big deal. Keenan still kicked it.
Now, man. Like,
You can go as long as you want. You can go as long as you want. No, all the rules are off now. That
Yeah, all bets are off. All bets are off.
all bets are off.
But now we're on to our last segment of the podcast, which is the rants. So this is the segment where Mark and Becc will give us their closing thoughts for today. So let's start out with Becc. What is your rant for today?
Yeah, my rant's very, very short. And I mean, we've been staying in tow for some reason in this theme. It's like, just get ahead of the pain for the buyer. Know the things that they don't know before they do. So I wouldn't wait for a buyer to run into a pain and an impact so that they're like, wow, that really hurt. Now I need to do something about it. So they have to do something about it. I'm like, get ahead of it so you can warn them. If someone had warned Southwest Airlines, hey, if you continue as is, this is likely going to happen, and you're going to be a case study in universities of what not to do from a business perspective and lose your sweetheart brand and turn thousands of customers and make them stranded during the holiday season. Like, I have to imagine, I have to believe they would have done something about it. If someone had called me before our first podcast and said, hey, notice you're doing the podcast and your internet's only at this speed. Did you know that if you continue as is and you walk into that podcast, they're not going to be able to see you or hear you, and it's going to garbage up your first podcast episode, which is important to me. So I'm like, get ahead of the pain for the buyer. Be in their corner. Have their back. Know the things they don't know for them. That's when you're helping them. And you're really, really helping them along the way by way of selling. So I'm like, selling is not a privilege, or is a privilege, not a right. Right? So like, lean into that privilege by knowing the things, outlearn your buyer so that you can help them along the way. Mark, what's your rant? I'm excited for what the rant is.
I don't think I have a killer rant, but like, listen, this is what I know right now is we are entering in what might be one of the most difficult times, especially in tech sales in recent years. Like, COVID hurt for a little bit. I think we're in for some sustained pain as companies figure out how they want to spend money more effectively to adjust to what the market currently rewards, which is more efficient and more profit-driven growth, right? And what do people do when they're scared? What do the people do when they're nervous? What do people do when they're confronted with a challenge? They retreat back to what they know and what's comfortable. And I am begging people, if you take that action, what you're going to do is you're going to spend more money top of funnel trying to get in more pipeline and trying to help your AEs convert strangers into revenue, which is the hardest, the longest, the most expensive, and the most risky way to grow your company. And if you retreat back into those type of strategies, you will be passed by people that take the opposite approach. And when you need money, do you go to a stranger or do you go to your family? You go to your family. And that's what we need to do. We need to start thinking differently about our customers. I had this unbelievable rep when I was at my last company before Outreach. He was this short, stocky Greek dude. And you could go into any office in northern New Jersey, and Peter would be able to say, Becc, hey, isn't your brother the wrestler at this high school whose coach is this guy, whose aunt was this person, who knew this guy over here, and is the principal of this school where my son goes, and we know each other and talk all the time. He could do 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon for himself with anybody. But unfortunately, he was a poor performer because he didn't understand the purpose of a business relationship. It's not to be friends. It's for commercial gain and value creation for that person. That's the purpose of a business relationship. If you want to be friends, go be friends. But don't be friends when you should be having a business relationship, right? Now, that doesn't mean it can't be cordial and all those sorts of things, but like the purpose is for revenue creation and value creation. So therefore, we need to look at our customers, which we're in a business relationship with, in the same way. How do we make sure that we're using our customers to help us grow more efficiently, faster, easier, less risky, less expensive way than what we're doing with new acquisition? And the companies that figure out that in the next 6 months will lap the companies that don't. And it's really frustrating to talk to revenue leaders who can't get past what they know and what they're comfortable with and enter into this new reality. And I applaud the ones that are, and I encourage the ones that aren't to start to change their minds, because otherwise you're going to get left in the dust.
It's incredible.
And that's our podcast.
That's it. Thanks so much, Mark, for coming. Just a blast. Excited to welcome you into the new role. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week for your next episode of Top to Bottom. You'll have to tune in to see who is it. Is it Keenan? Is it Mark? Did we actually punt him? Did we break up? Tune in next week to see. Thanks.
Good job, Keenan. Good job, Becc.